We're in conversation with Mrs. Kinnear, the wife of the late Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear, who was gunned down outside of this very home where we are having a conversation with her beloved wife. Now, thank you so much for your time in opening up your home, knowing very well that this matter is currently before the courts. Let's talk about Mr. Kinnear and the man that you knew, and the pictures that we see around him clearly display how much he was loved inside this home.
Yeah, look, my husband, my kids and I always say that I think his work forced him to have a certain persona because of the kind of investigations and things that he did. But inside, within these four walls, he was a huge teddy bear. You know, he would quietly either be sitting, doing his work, preparing investigations, or he and the boys might have been watching a game on television, or he would be sleeping because of the extensive long hours that they worked. He loved sleeping. Yeah, he would always nap.
Now, when did you meet him? Did you know at the time that he was a police officer? I can imagine that, of course, he has been in the South African police force for many, many years. When did you meet him? How did you meet?
Okay, let me start by saying we've been together for 36 years. So we started out, let's say we were high school sweethearts, we were tertiary institution sweethearts. How my husband and I met, he was actually my Sunday school teacher. So we go way back. If he was alive, he would always joke and he would say, yeah, he met me when I still wore a vest. So, yeah, so I mean, I was his matric ball partner. 4 years later, he was mine. Yeah, so we were part of each other's lives when he went way back when he started out as a student in the police service. That was in 1989. Yeah, so I was basically with him throughout his career path. After completing as a student, he worked for a year in the guard unit. Then he moved to Ravensmead as a detective, later to Nyanga, later to Mitchell's Plain, organized crime. Yeah, so I've pretty much been there the entire step of the way. I always say, if you go to a police station and you look for detectives, they're always sitting in these long passages, and they will always tell you, you know, up for the stairs, down that passage, the third office. So I was there at that stage. Or we were together already at that stage, and later on, as he became commander and of the detective branches, I was on the other side of the table as well. Yeah.
Now, talk to us about his love for being part of the South African police service. And I can imagine someone who has served for many, many years, clearly there was passion to do the job.
Look, I think that was him. In general, my husband by nature was somebody, what he started in, he completed. And even with the boys, I mean, you know, with kids growing up, they pretty much do all sports, which we pretty much allowed our boys, but he was very firm in instilling in the boys and in the discipline, if you start something, you will finish it. And that was just his way with his investigations as well. For him, it started as a detective when he goes into a scene and literally from scratch. I think his satisfaction was when he's seen it through court and ultimately he got a conviction. That was when he would close a docket. Until then, he would keep going and keep going and keep going, and that was, he just had this drive that he wouldn't give up. He would continue. I mean, I remember at the time of his assassination, he had a docket that he was actually carrying with him for, I think, 23 years. And that family actually messaged me to sympathize and to actually thank us for his dedication that he had, because he firmly believed that as time changes and that as forensics and everything else evolves, he would solve that case. So he would not just give up. And that was each and every investigation that he did. That was the diligence. That was the attitude that he had. It didn't matter who you were, where you stayed, color or creed, everybody got the same attention from him. I know a lot of other reporters said, yeah, there would always be a buzz in the newsroom if they know it's his cases and stuff. There was always this excitement because they always said, no, the detective with all the files and stuff. And then I actually told them that all those files that you would actually see him, and a lot of videos that have been displayed over the past 8 months, you would always see him with his arch lever files in his hands and walking. Those were actually his dockets. That was his way. A normal brown cover was just never suffice. Detail, that was him. And I think the passion, it was definitely more than a job. He really saw it as a calling, and I think hence why he did what he did. A lot of people ask me, knowing what we knew, did I ever give him an ultimatum as a wife? And then I said I would never be able to, because my husband would never be able to forgive himself if he had walked away from anything and he came to another scene. He would always ask himself, could I have done something differently? And likewise, in many ways, I'm the same, and I would never put him in that situation to walk away and then always wonder, could I have made a difference?
So clearly you knew the implications of him being this invested and this passionate about his job. Of course, that would have been translated through how he operated within the home structure. How was he like with the boys, and what was his relationship like with his children?
Look, the boys and the dad had a very special relationship. He was very strict. My boys knew, and I think part and parcel of what he was exposed to on the outside world, I think also forced him to be very strict on the boys. But despite all of that, huge respect from both sides. My boys, and if I listen to them, then you actually realize they at a very young age, as they would often say, they realized that their dad was just not a normal detective. They were like sharing him with everyone else. And they say this as in the early teens, because both my boys started playing football at the age of 4, for example. And at a young age, all you want is your dad to be there and to acknowledge and yes, and mom is there, but it's not the same. I've scored a goal, I want to high five my dad, and and he would often try and be there. And unfortunately, when he was there, he always had to be on the outskirts for fear of exposing people of knowing the connection. So the boys you would often see them scan the ground, while playing, and they would pick him up and they know he's there. But even if I do score a goal, even if I do score something, I'm not able to go and high five my dad. So they would always, by means of eye contact or whatever, they would acknowledge. And those are some of the sacrifices that I think a lot of people don't know, and not only my children, but how a lot of kids in police houses, if we could call it that, needs to grow up. We have been living here for 27, 28 years. I remember when my boys went to youth, some of the kids asked them, by then they were 17, 18 already, and would ask them, oh, when did you guys move in there? And then they said, well, we grew up here, because we were forced to rear them a certain way because of the job that their dad did. Unfortunately, his career path has always taken him into a specialized unit. The only time that he was at a station was at the time when he was at Ravensmead many years ago, and then now later, I think in 2016, Seapoint. Other than that, he was always based at a specialized unit, which obviously always exposed him to another criteria of investigations, if we could call it that. Yeah.
Now let's go back to the time in 2019 when there was a hand grenade that was allegedly thrown at a house, and he was also implicated in there. Talks of him being a target at that point in time. of course, you were aware that he's working in specialized units within the South African service, knowing that his life is at risk and the way that you've raised your children. What came through your mind at that time?
Look, as I said, I think my boys are 25 and 20 now, so that's about 2 years ago. So my boys were relatively older, but I still maintain that is a conversation that no dad or no mom in the police force should be able to have with his children, having to sit them down and explain to them that if certain things happen, what are you supposed to do? And where, because obviously the evening, it was on the 23rd of November when the guy was actually caught with a hand grenade. So you don't know, okay, this one might have been a failed attempt, but you don't know whether there are going to be any more. And that is the kind of conversation that I don't wish on any dad. And I could see, I mean, 2 years ago, my husband was in the force for 30 years, and I could still see that. I mean, obviously he's had many scenes. He had to go and convey messages to many families, but having to see the trauma my husband had to go through in having to explain to his boys, what to do if something should happen. And okay, at that time we had the guarding, and to say, but don't worry, the guys will have the outside, don't run out, don't whatever, and what's supposed to do. So that's a picture that I'd like to fade in my mind.
As a mother, how did that make you feel? I mean, now he has to explain that his work is
It's terrible. Look, and obviously, as I said, my boys were older, so obviously, without us necessarily explaining to them, I think they also sort of realized why we were withholding them. Because remember, at a certain age, all you want to do is bounce around with your kids why can't I? What makes me different? And you need to give them information without necessarily scaring them or causing them to become paranoid. But the kids are not stupid, I mean, the kids, they read on the internet, they see all these kinds of stuff. And so in a way, we kept them enlightened. And I think they also realized that, look, it is what it is. This is my dad's job. This is what he's doing. And as a family, we've got a role to play. I think the other thing that also sort of in our family space is that I think we all of us bought into not only my husband's passion, but all of us are as passionate. We're passionate about our community. We're passionate about doing things right, not giving up. So all of us, we supported not only what he did, but we share that. Hence why even after his passing, we cannot do his investigations, but his role that he played and that he wanted to play in community didn't only stop or start by an investigation of a docket. He was set on proving, because a lot of people tend to look at the Cape Flat areas and sort of look down at certain people that comes from that. We reared our kids that where you come from does not define you. And certain decisions we made, yes, in terms when it came to the education and stuff like that, but that was just it. And that was one of the reasons why both of us grew up in the Bishop Lavis community. And yes, we could probably have moved elsewhere if we wanted to, but we didn't want to, because we believed that where you stay does not define you. And if my husband in his work and everything else, if we could be role models and we could help, and my husband coached in Bishop Lavis at the football club, my kids played here, so it's part of our blood, as what our blood is blue, as part of the SAPS family.
Attempt on his life, of course, shocked the entire family, and even having to explain to the kids. So from the part of the South African police then, did he receive protection, knowing very well that this had just taken place?
Okay. What happened was, we were actually, when the attack happened, or the attempt, we were actually under guarding. So that night the police were actually outside so despite that, or the guards being here, that did not deter them. And look, I also mentioned before that my husband has been on many a list, and the police has their way of finding intel, and you know, he would always just phone and where are you, where are the kids, that kind of thing. But there was just 2017 something different about the whole scenario that changed, that this was different. It wasn't just the normal, you know, so when it happened, we had guarding, because we went under guarding on the 13th. So we had guarding. The incident was on the 23rd, and we had guarding until the 19th of December 2019. Then the day shift still worked with my husband, accompanied him. They were just never relieved for a night shift. At that stage, I personally thought that because that was just the time when Stachi was murdered, and I remember that Saturday was his funeral, and we obviously knew that there was going to be higher police presence, etc. So that was my initial thought when the guards didn't. That okay, maybe for now, you know, knowing what's happening on Saturday, this is probably the arrangement. And then obviously the Saturday came and went, and then we were into the Christmas week and everything, and I left it. And then in January, I actually raised the concern publicly in media, because then I thought, okay, now clearly something, you know, is amiss here. Yeah. And yeah, look, I firmly believe that sometimes God prompts things in your heart and you need to be obedient. And like I said, I don't know why I just had that something is different. And that is why I actually spoke out about it, because...
were there any changes then effected to try and bring back the protection?
No, nothing happened. Look, as I said, obviously as ourselves, we had certain ways of doing things. I mean, my kids, as big as what they are, they know they need to check in, whatever we've got, the sort of system that we do. And
how did that then sit with him? You're already out, you're trying to make people aware that you no longer have protection because you're worried, rightfully so. How did he take it? Did he write to the national management of the South African police, or at least the provincial, to ask what is happening? Why did they withdraw the protection?
Look, I know that there was, and everybody know, prior in 2018, my husband submitted that lengthy 59-page affidavit, which was... it was specifically, there was mention of the CI in there, okay? And crime intelligence is the exact same unit that's supposed to do the risk assessment. So it's clear, and everybody knows, my husband did not trust the crime intelligence. So he was not comfortable in allowing into our space, because remember, you need to, if a risk assessment is your accessibility, how, whatever, etc. So, but having said all of that, is that I know they wanted to meet up with him. He stayed home the week directly after the hand grenade attack, specifically because my youngest had his valedictory in that time. And he actually, the 28th, he left for Johannesburg, and he was only back in mid-December.
Do you know what he was going to do in Johannesburg?
Look, also investigations that he was busy with, and I think it's all to do with the last investigation with his that he was busy with this, with illegal firearms and those kind of stuff. So,
and that implicated senior members within the force
as well. Yes, and I know
was there a particular reason why he decided to go to Joburg?
Look, obviously the investigation took him there. So not only this particular there was a lot of his investigations that took him out of province. Obviously, you need to go to where it originated, where it started from. This started in Johannesburg, hence he had to go. But with all of that, I know there was reports that he didn't want to give his cooperation, where I know he said, okay, listen guys, I need to be out, but meet me that side, meet me that way. Some of the reports that came back said, COVID came in, and they couldn't finish the assessment. This was now based on after the assassination, when the questions were asked as to what happened. But then again, SAPS is essential services. My question is that I understand that there is protocol. There is a SAPS policy which clearly stipulates the processes that needs to be followed. And I get that part. But like with any risk or disaster situation, when it comes to a disaster situation, doesn't matter where you work, you need to manage it differently. You cannot go through a system that's going to take you 3-4 months. So for me, the day that they came here, the attempt on the 23rd, they didn't come to deliver a cake. They were here physically, and if not stopped, they would have thrown a hand grenade. So for me, I'm of the opinion that, yes, tick all your tick boxes, do everything, but something still had to be done immediately. We couldn't have here, but sorry, the protocols and the systems is we only. So that for me does not sit well, and I've also raised my opinion to that, because I am quite sure that I don't know of any other officer, but there might be more. And what are we going to do? If there's such a heated attempt on somebody, are we now going to hide behind our policy instead of seeing that our colleague is safe? At least something is put in place whilst we are busy doing all the necessary work behind the scenes. I also, as I said, it's not a secret in terms of how my husband felt about the crime intelligence, but then I also said, then we have a national office. Then the issue should have been addressed and said, listen guys, we know that there's still an unresolved issue here, but still the process needs to be completed. So then let somebody else, or let the national office let us then do, but we can't just leave it.
There was also a recommendation for disbanding the crime intelligence in the province.
That specific rogue unit, which nothing was done to, yes.
What did he identify in it that warranted it being?
Look, there was specific members that he mentioned that specifically hindered, and there was interference with certain cases and stuff that he was specifically working and dealing with. There was a lot of issues that we as a family needed to deal with that he did not even highlight in there. In his 59-page document, he out and out only mentioned the work-related stuff. But there were incidences, for example, as a family, where my kids were followed by some of those people mentioned in there.
And they're part of the South African police.
And they are. And in that document, then General Jacobs acknowledged that this is a rogue unit and things need to be done. And here we are in 2021, and still nothing has changed. So
the same people that were implicated in that affidavit are still there within the South African police.
In the same units exactly, in the crime intelligence services.
So now, those people are implicated in that affidavit. They're part of his investigations, and 2020 happens, the 18th of September. Yeah. Talk to us about that day.
Look, also what happened was I think it was not long after my husband's assassination, and I think it was actually with the program with the late Karima Brown, that she had with the minister, where it actually surfaced that the NPA had decided not to prosecute on that document, okay, for whatever reasons. Even though, remember, the process that was followed was, when you come forward, I can't just accept, or my husband, even though he sent in the document, they couldn't just accept what this man was saying. It needed to be investigated, which IPID in actual fact did. So IPID also made certain recommendations. So for whatever reason, it was decided not to go forth, and even against some of IPID's recommendations.
How did that make your husband feel then? Did it make him feel like, is there a point of working within a South African police service that is that involved in investigations that are that serious, and can have a hand in stopping investigations from taking
Look,
place?
I think he was at certain points you could see he was very, very frustrated, because obviously it feels as though you're walking against a wall all the time. But as I said, my husband had this tendency where he could be knocked flat and very despondent today, and he would come home and he would nap and he would whatever, and he would, by the grace of God, tomorrow he would be able to get up.
Did he fear for his life, especially considering that they refused to investigate part of the things that he put in that affidavit?
Look, I think he, obviously as a family, you're not going to discuss to the point where, listen, this and this is my life, So we would speak about certain things. He was very, very uncomfortable, as I mentioned, in allowing them into our space. And I agree, because, I know of many a times when he was away on investigations, then I have to phone him to say, listen, but this and such and such a car. And we would take pics and we would send, and our kids being followed and all of that kind of stuff, which is terrible, because I'm here, he's out of province. Now he needs to tap into colleagues who are here and say, listen, go help and sort out my family. So he was immensely frustrated about that. But as I said, he was that kind of person. He would not let that stop him. He would not.
So it must mean that what he pinned down in that affidavit is that serious.
Look, I think that is but a tip of the iceberg. In terms of, because that was the one aspect. It had nothing to do, for example, with the investigation that he was dealing with now in Johannesburg. So I think ultimately there's a lot of loose threads and ends that we will probably eventually be able to pull together. So the 2018 document that he wrote was one aspect.
Which involved the gun licensing.
No. Remember, the 2018 document had no mention of any gun licensing. That was specifically about him feeling victimized and by colleagues and hampering him in terms of his. That's why I said it's like a lot of loose ends that will eventually. And I think.
When did he start working on this gun racketeering case?
It's been years. I think it could be two years, if not longer.
And that implicated senior SAPS members?
Yeah, those are the, because remember, I think the first takedown on those particular cases happened in June last year. Yeah.
Now take us through to 2020. What was he working on in the last few months and certainly in the last few weeks before his death?
Look, obviously my husband's investigations and people need to understand that for obvious reasons. My husband, and people might now say, oh yeah, right, but my husband would have certain takedowns that he arrested a lot of people, and he would come in the next day and he would put the newspaper on the table, and that is when my boys and I would see it. So obviously with it, and for good reason. They don't discuss their dockets and their stuff with us. So I knew they were going down to Johannesburg. I knew he was investigating, obviously, because you would see him going through registers and stuff. So I knew he was busy with firearms, but we never knew what about that. My kids and I had also come and we respected each other in that what he could and wanted to share with us, he would, but we would also never overstep the line in terms of asking. And I think he also, in a way, it was his way of protecting us, if and ever anything should happen, So, so indirectly, I think I also got a better picture in terms of the seriousness and when the takedown really happened, because then the names started coming out in who was arrested and in terms of even colleagues and, as you've mentioned, the senior SAPS people that was then also.
Talk to us about the takedown.
Look, the takedown was in June, I think, last year, first or second week in June was when he did his first arrest on that actual cases. And I think now I can't remember even how many it was, but once again, we read about it because obviously it was out of province, and so we heard about it in the news and how many people, etc., etc.
Which implicated SAPS.
Yes, or SAPS members, yeah.
So now, on the day of the 18th, before him leaving home, what do you remember about your engagements with him, your interactions with him before he left home?
Look, a lot of people have asked us, was it different? Did you do things differently that week, etc., etc.? No, we didn't. He was very busy that week because what they also have is they have a standby duty officer for the province, and that week he was on duty. So then it's sort of a bit of more work on there because now they all the stations would report back and they have massive meetings. So you sort of consolidate everything that's happening at the different stations. So that week he was on duty, so which is extra stats and stuff that needs to be managed and info given through. So that Friday morning he actually left a bit earlier than normally because he had a 12 o'clock. Normally that meetings would be at 12, and he had a meeting that day. So he went in obviously to finish his stats and things, and by the time his detectives would come on, he would be able to, converse and communicate with them.
Now, it has been revealed that his phone was pinged over 2,000 times. And if we look back to the recent years now, we have to eliminate all the other years given the fact that he's been in the South African police for many years. Yeah. Take it back to 2019, which we know now since then he's been followed, right? There's been an attempt and a conspiracy to murder him since 2019. There are certain individuals who are now standing before a court of law, accused number one, for instance, in the case that's currently taking place. He's been implicated in the pinging of his phone and trying to conspire to commit murder since 2019 already. And now we're in 2020. And he gets gunned down literally outside of his home.
Yeah. Look, obviously at that stage, we didn't know everything that we know now. A lot of things have obviously surfaced over the period of time with the court, the bail applications, etc. That's one of the questions that I've also asked in terms of with the portfolio committee, because it came to light I think alarm bells were raised very early. In the first time I think was early September, in terms of the number of times that it was happening, the pinging and stuff was happening, and there it says that, intel and feedback was given that, listen, something is amiss here. And that was my question that I've asked. Why was nothing done? Why, when this intel was given, was nothing done in terms of, because surely you're not going to raise, you're not going to ping for what? Like, as I said, to what? Deliver flowers to this man? I mean, and as we heard in the court, I think it was with Zayn's bail application, I mean, there were times that we were together that it was per coordinate in terms of where we are, and obviously you can do this via the cell towers and stuff, and what time we're going to be where, and what is the estimated time to be at home, and all that kind of stuff, which is it's scary. I mean, you sit in court and you listen, and it's though everybody had this access to this movie, which is actually your life, and you were unaware of all of this happening, behind the scenes.
And the question still remains, why was nothing done? Yeah. The police minister was here soon after his assassination. Do you perhaps still haven't had any answer from him or even the National Commission?
Look, obviously we presentation was done on the 23rd of Feb. At the portfolio committee. The two hard questions that I had asked or drafted in my petition was, one, why was the guarding removed to start off with in 2019? That was the one question. I know that the National Commissioner, even before, I think it was, look, I was at the Portfolio Commission on the 23rd of February, but I think last year, after the assassination, the question was also asked. And the National Commissioner's answer then was that no official authorization had been given. So my question was on the 23rd, if so, why not? What more needed to happen? What more needs to happen to any member? Because clearly a hand grenade incident is not sufficient. So tell us from SAP's side, what do you want to happen to a member or to your members before you see it the need to? Because I also asked the question is, must you be a certain rank in the police to get certain, privileges or guarding, etc., which the National Commissioner referred to the security policy, where it clearly states that each and every officer, if there's a threat, what is the process, etc., etc. Again, I say, fine, there's a process, but what do you do if you need to make a decision immediately? You must be able to know, I need to think out of the box.
Do you believe that the same people, senior SAPS members within the force that were implicated in his investigations, do you think they might have had a hand in preventing him getting that protection?
I don't know. I don't know. And that is why I said we have to keep on pushing. Even with the current arrest and everything else that's happening, we have to keep on pushing, because I need to know why, for example, with a matter as serious as was our guarding removed. I also know, it's also actually not I know, it's in the public domain, that the very same people that my husband wrote the document about, the 59-page document out, and complained about, 2 or 3 weeks after his assassination, they received guarding. So my question is, and that is what I'll continue asking is certain things reserved for certain privileges or privileged people, or what do you need to do for everybody to be treated the same?
Knowing that, and having seen accused number 7 in the case now, who was an anti-gang police officer, and seeing him in the dock, and knowing what you know now about protection being withdrawn and certain members getting protection and you not receiving answers, and having people from within the force working with these alleged criminals, how does that make you feel?
Look, obviously at this stage it's all alleged and allegations, even though they have been charged, yes, but we're not even at the bail application.
But the idea of knowing that the South African police members, some of them, are that much involved in their ongoing criminal activities.
I said yesterday as well, it's like your own, so it's like, it's very difficult. I think in this 8 months, you ask yourself the questions, who can be involved? A lot of people, all over, people will comment and say, SAP's involvement. So all those things run through your mind, and you think, okay, and I have said several times that everybody responsible, because this didn't start with the gunman and end with the gunman. There are many other key role players there that we need to get to everyone. So, but when it happens, like the very first time last week when I was faced with having to see a fellow member in blue, it affects you differently. And I also realized that emotionally, as a family, we're going to have to prepare ourselves, because we don't know where this investigation is going to take us. And like I said, it's one thing to imagine everything, and you say, yes, everybody must be brought to book and whatever, but still, if you're confronted And I mean, even yesterday, I mean, a lot of people saw, you know, my youngest son walked out.
He stepped out of court immediately when the accused stepped in the dock.
Because he was actually sick to his, actually it started yesterday morning before, he was sick to his stomach, and he was actually sick in the bathroom, because I think it's you prepare yourself, or you think you're preparing yourself, and this is what we want. We want the guys that's responsible for our dad's death to be brought to book. But I think if you're faced with that reality that, okay, this could actually be that, or these are the guys that are accused, and this is it now, I need to face that. I think.
Are you angry at the police for failing to protect your husband and the father of your children?
Look, I'm angry for them for failing not only my family, but that is why I say my quest is, because this is not a movie, and I said I can't have a take two. This is it. It's done. Nothing that we do now, whether they rewrite the whole policy of whatever, it's not going to change my situation. But I also say that, like my husband, there are many other detectives out there, because the reality is, yes, my husband had a heavy caseload, but he didn't have the whole of South Africa's dockets on his desk. So somewhere out there are guys, women that I don't even know by name, but have also got such sensitive information.
Do you think they were stopping him by assassinating him? They were stopping him from revealing some very important information?
I think that is the obvious thing. I think he was stopped for more than just that. I think obviously exposing, but I think also that a very loud message had to be sent in terms of intimidation, because the reality is that somebody needs to take over. Because he's now no longer with us doesn't mean whatever else was on his table is just going to lie and stagnate now. Somebody needs to take over. So we needed to get a message clearly sent here to the justice system that this is how far we will go. And that is why I said, not that I'm saying now we need to fight back, but what are we going to do in response? And if I say response, I speak not only on SAPS, because yes, we're in Cape Town. Yes, my husband was based at AGU. Yes, one of his last cases, as it now in public domain, is evident that he was working with illegal firearms, etc., etc. But the reality is that those stuff that he was investigating, let us say those illegal firearms and issuing them licensing and whatever, as we've now come to know, they don't have a label on that says, you know what, I'm going to Hanover Park, or I'm going to Bishop Lavis, or I'm going to Mitchell's Plain. So who knows where all those weapons and things are ending up. So people might be reasoning, yes, and with all probability it might be that those are the weapons that's used on the Cape Flats and the gang related, but they can also be the weapons that's being used to commit farm murders and business robberies and a lot of other brutal crimes. So hence why for me my husband's death was not only a loss to us as a family or to the AGU family. He was trying to do something for his community, but for the South Africa. People that he didn't know. It wasn't just about us. And I think that is the thing that we must not put incidences into silos and think because the person is associated with a province, that is that province's problem. I think we need to see the bigger picture here. And that for me is the concern, that we reach out as a nation and try and stop this, because SAPS alone cannot do it, unfortunately. As I said, I choose to look at this thing holistically, and not, if I'm going to, at the point where we're at, and not taking it lightly. So obviously you have all that anger and everything, but for now I need to make the decision that if certain things are going to happen, I cannot allow that to dictate my life and for us to fall apart, because I don't have the liberty of being knocked down for 3 or 4 days and then getting back up. As I said, this is but the tip of the iceberg, so I need to keep going. And if I say that, I'm not saying I'll just accept it. Obviously the necessary questions and things need to be asked, but not only in my case, I'm speaking in general now about other cases, why certain things are happening. And those are the questions that we need to keep asking, because if we're not going to hold people accountable for certain things, it's just going to go by the wayside, you know. So my husband, I know, you asked me whether I feel that he died for a good cause. I do, because I know how he felt about his life. And about his job and what he was doing, and he continued doing what he was doing, because as you know and asked before, he knew his life was threatened. So he could have, but it's because of the fact that he was thinking of those bleeding families on the Cape Flats, those bleeding families in farm murders, wherever, robberies. He was thinking about those families and not only my family. Hence why he continued doing what he was doing. He was a selfless person. I always said if the kids and I stood still long enough, he would probably give us away as well. I think he had a very stern demeanor, and a lot of people thought he was not approachable, he was cold, but he was actually he had a very big heart, and because of that, and the passion and the heart that he had for his country, for his oath, not only for his own community, that is why he kept on going. And if we would be able to ask him, I think, if we told him, okay, we are able to get the government to look into, and this are the changes, and this is being eradicated. If we promise you all of these things, what would you do? Would you lay your life down? I know you would say yes. And that is why I've got to see that, and I don't know. I'm but another widow, one of many. I don't know whether they're going to listen to me. They might not. But I also know that the word of the Lord clearly says, if I've given you a task, you see that you do your task. And that was my and my husband's motto as well. He knew that things are not what it should be, but that did not stop him from doing his task. If he did his task and he handed it over to the next person, the baton was handed to the next, what we call it, department, and you didn't go ahead, he did his bit. And that is my quest. If my job out of all of this is to speak about it and to raise awareness or alarm as to, listen, this is the plight that we as wives or families of police officers carrying these caseloads are experiencing, have a look at us. Have a look at the members. If that is my job, then that is my job. If I've given my message and nothing is done, it's out of my hands. But I say I don't want to be at a year from now, and heaven forbid, or 2 or 5 or 10, because I don't wish what my family is going through on any other family. But I refuse to look or have to look another widow in the eye and then think and ask myself, if only. Because if I listen to that woman and I hear that she's actually going through exactly what I was going through all those years ago, I don't then want to have regrets and say, if only I spoke about it, maybe they would have listened, you know, or maybe somebody would have written an article about it or done an interview about it or something. I don't want that, because then I have blood on my hands too. And that for me is our heart as a family. It was my husband's heart, it's my heart, it's my children's heart, and hence why I cannot go out and yes, I want accountability, yes, I want answers, yes, I want to know who gave instruction to withdraw the guarding, who did not do anything when they knew my husband's phone was being pinged. I want all of those answers, but I cannot go and just say, as a family, we've gone out and we've declared war on SAPS, because the reality is not everyone is corrupt out there. And even if you are feeling so alone and feeling as though you're banging your head against a wall, I feel that so often, and we know, bad news and certain things, it sells stories, it sells newspapers, it causes views, and for me, I actually want somewhere here small in a corner actually of a publication, we should be giving acknowledgement to the corrupt cops, for example, or corrupt officials per se, and acknowledge those that are really doing their job. Help them keep their arms up. And make them feel that we as a public and South Africa and communities, you know what, we're behind you, we support you. I mean, if I see the support my husband and my husband's death is getting now, then I sometimes sit and I wonder if only he knew that, or he knew before, you know. But it is what it is, you know, he's no longer here. But like I said, he's not the only one fighting this battle. Definitely not. And we have to equip those people.
Now, my last question to you is that fateful day, the 18th of September. Where were you? Where were the kids? Of course, you've got cameras around your house. Who saw what and how it transpired? Of course, we saw that CCTV footage being released of how that gunman was roaming the street. Talk to us about that day, where you were. We see you in pictures standing, literally looking at the crime scene. Take us through that day.
Okay, I wasn't home. I was at work. My boys were home.